guys, welcome to another episode of Couch Talks. You of course have myself, Nerdfather CJ. You have Zill sitting on the beanbag over here, and we have Rye Guy, the normal crew, but we have a couple guests as well. We have the Void, whose name shall be known as D, and we have Dan the Man Higgins. The most important man gets introduced last, of course.
Wow. Which means Noelle.
Yes, so this is Noelle. You guys all know Noelle. Look at her. She's such a good puppy.
She's really just after this.
And she'd be really disappointed in you guys if you don't smash the like button. So make sure you smash the like button.
Make sure to like the video.
Yeah.
And hit the bell button and subscribe
and all that.
just hit lots of buttons down
Basically
there.
throw your whole computer out the window, to start there.
If you turn the whole, keyboard upside down and
just start smashing,
it should
things will
probably
go.
work.
Things will go
I
well.
don't think that'll do much.
Yeah. All right.
It'll do a lot, and that's the problem.
Anyway, we are going to talk about a tabletop role-playing game that I have been working for years and years on, along with my friend James, who lives up in the mountains somewhere, so he wasn't able to participate in this video. And in recent years, Zill has been helping me, and then these guys are helping me because they're helping me play test it. So we wanted to talk about that system and kind of some of the mechanics and all that jazz. And it sounded like before we started the video, everybody wanted to talk about their characters and how their characters are interacting with the system and the world that I have rolled for this system that I call Tide. So anybody want to start out? Don't everybody volunteer once?
Okay, yeah,
Alright.
So my character is just a human. I based him off of a previous character that I'd played in D&D, just a fighter. And so I mean, I don't know. I didn't really have that many hopes or forward story for him this time, which I think is nice. Coming into this, not really knowing what the narrative of the story is going to be. But yeah, he's just basically a human, human fighter.
Okay.
You should introduce the world as well.
Well, yeah, that's fair. So Tide is a kind of a semi-steampunk, mostly fantasy world that I've made that is mostly, has one extremely large continent, like the size of Europe and Asia and that whole region of our world.
Known as Eurasia.
And known as Eurasia, thank you. And which is, I think the continent itself is actually called Tide. And then you have the
Yes.
Confederacy, which is just a smattering of islands that are fairly large, that kind of opposes the continent of Tide. And we're playing in a kind of a backwater island where goblins pretty much rule. And the idea of the current sessions are kind of built to be kind of one-offs. There's no real narrative currently, just because I want people to feel free if they want to try a different build or a different character to be able to do that. So far, everybody's really enjoyed their characters, so that's pretty good. So going back to you, Dan, real quick, I'm sorry. How do you feel about the character creation process, like when you're building your character in the image of your previous character?
Yeah. So, as a human, I don't think I had that big of an issue when it came to the race builder or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But no, it definitely snagged me on a few things, but that's coming from D&D and other role-playing games. But
Oh, she's freaking out.
It's okay. It's okay. You alright?
Oh.
Yeah.
but no, I think having you there with me during that time was helpful. But no, I think the rules are certainly written out well enough that I probably would have been able to get it eventually by myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Well, it's good to hear, because I mean they're definitely a draft, just a rough draft, but they're just a draft of the rules that is not final.
Right.
So
the one thing that really confused me at first was the difference between expertise and how that ranks up as opposed to spending the credits or the points or whatever they are, the AP.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was just a little confusing at the beginning.
And that's probably one of currently one of our newest systems. So we'll come back to that and talk more about that.
Right.
But let's go ahead and let Ryan introduce his character that he's playing right now.
My character is a spellcaster shark goblin. We kind of I modeled my character so that it could be conjoined with Zill's character, so that we kind of had a way of making our characters have a backstory of knowing each other, which kind of tied into how our first route of the campaign went and how we all were brought together. Especially with it being such an aquatic heavy world, I thought it would be nice to have a character that was, does just as well on land as under the sea. But I didn't want to go so far as the Shadows character, which is this creepy merfolk thing that hovers around on water and is stalking someone else's character.
Well, we'll figure that out later. It's true. We'll see how long that guy will be following me around.
Yeah. No, that's it's an interesting character for sure. Ryan, how did you feel about the character creation process?
For the most part, it was a little confusing. I'm not particularly good at making characters since I've only rolled, 2, maybe 3. I guess 4 if you count some of my 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons
at least 3 with our playgroup.
I would say stat-wise, it all made pretty sense, especially with there being just the 3 main stats. The issue I had was when coming up with specialties and those kinds of things, because there just weren't so many already written down, and it was kind of so open-ended that it was almost it wasn't easy for me to decide what I wanted those to be until I decided how I wanted to roll the character, to decide what those skills were going to be that made sense for him.
Yep.
But other than that, it was pretty easy just to assign stats and skill points and whatnot.
That's fair.
But I think it should be said also that, with the feats or whatever they are, the talents.
Yeah,
isn't that
call
what it
them
is?
talents instead of feats, but yeah, they're effectively feats.
Right. I think we haven't really, and you haven't fleshed out a whole lot of them, so that can certainly be just room for improvement.
Yeah,
and that's all.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yep. And one of the reasons I didn't want to try to sit down and pump out, 200 different talents is because I kind of like to embrace that open-endedness a little bit. So I figure, we're all here to play test and have fun. So, we can probably make up some kind of on the go. And, it's been an ongoing thing, because we've already edited a couple of them slightly. There's still 1 or 2 of them that I'm kind of looking at changing a little bit because I think they're either too powerful or too weak.
Right, which is much easier to see once you actually get within the campaign. You're like, okay, that is no go, that's too much, that's not quite enough.
Yeah. So we'll go ahead and ask the Void what his character is like and what he thought of the character creation process.
So far my favorite part of the process of creating a character was actually just designing a new race, which is a very robust system you already have so far, of just different attributes, like legs cost points, and having like the ability to breathe underwater gives you cost some points, but if you don't breathe air, you get some back. I basically turned the mermaids of Tide into massive underwater torpedo hunters that swim ridiculously fast but can't get on land. So if you get away from them, you're usually fine.
But good luck with that.
Unless you're dealing with my character, who has decided that no one is safe.
And how did you achieve that particular ability?
I've been dipping into the magic system and working with the system we have in place, and was able to readjust one of the abilities that was effectively like water walking, but I gave myself land walking.
Yeah.
And it certainly is. It could be broken, but we learned even today that one round of unconsciousness is very bad for my character.
Yep.
Yes.
As you began to suffocate because you no longer have your bubble.
It's hard to focus while you're unconscious.
Don't go sniffing the jars at the apothecaries.
Yeah.
They might have a rag with chloroform.
Yeah, especially randomly, like the little sample jars, just a sample jar of chloroform, you know, no big deal.
Why do they need chloroform?
I mean, you're literally in a bandit den. That's all I need. I don't know what to tell you.
Fair enough.
And Zil, you are also playing a character, another goblin, shark goblin
Yeah.
guy thing. Would you like to talk about your character some?
I also really enjoyed the race builder because I made the shark goblins. We started up and we were like, oh shoot, where's the document full of all of the like species for this setting? And then we were like, well, there are none because we used to run it in different systems. So rather than like trying to recreate elves or something, I was like, cool, I'm gonna make a shark. So I made a shark. I gave them like the electroception and sense and
Tremor.
yeah, tremor sense, because sharks can detect like small pressure changes. Like that was really fun to mess with. And then I made a cleric of the Gob King of Thunder. So combination of like electricity and water and fire and air magics. Electricity falls under air. That's what I meant to say the first time. And his name is Big Storm Dark Cloud. And he's pretty great.
He who causes strife.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's kind of everybody's characters and everybody's first impressions with the Foxforge, as I'm calling it. The idea for me of the system was to build an RPG system that was kind of like vanilla or a sweet cream, you know, like it was relatively plain. It could go anywhere and run anything. And then what changes what it does and how it interacts are the modules, the magic modules, like the cleric and the wizard module, and various other modules that have yet to be created, but they'll be made eventually.
Like the superhero model
Like-
I've been kind of,
Tinkering with.
yeah, like getting done.
Yeah, so stuff like that. So that's kind of one of the core concepts that I've always operated under building this system, and I think so far it's been going really, really well. James and I have always approached the creation of the system under basically 4 different pillars. You have the explore pillar, which is, you know, all the skills you use to interact with the world, such as picking locks, sneaking around, climbing walls, hiding, etc. Then you have the combat system, which is the combat pillar, which is, you know, whenever you're fighting a zombie or whatnot. And then you have the social pillar, which, of course, you know, when you're talking to somebody, typically a non-player character in PC. And each pillar, the idea of splitting them into pillars is so that each one can operate a little bit different, so it doesn't feel like you're always just in combat, as an example. Which the social system is still heavily under construction, but the other 2 are doing quite well, I think. Do you guys have any questions about any of that? Or thoughts? Oops, sorry, Noel. I didn't realize you were right under me. It's okay.
You know, I haven't gotten the chance to really do a lot of combat in that game. I mean, we did do that one big fight, but I never really got to do, like, I just haven't gotten that much exposure with it. You know?
Yeah, you've only played 2 sessions now out of where these guys have played almost 4 or 5 maybe.
Right.
Yeah, at least 4.
Yeah.
The one thing that I thought was interesting is that, you know, I could, like, you know, boost my attack or rather my hit, right? Isn't that
Yeah.
Yeah.
correct? With my stamina, right? That I could expend points in my stamina to make my attack better. But what was interesting to me and what maybe continues to be interesting is you know, that you're rolling against each other. You
Yeah.
know, that is kind of interesting to me. And, you know, coming from other games where you just have like a flat defense or like a flat AC, that's just kind of been weird to me because, you know, like, I don't really know how that translates into like, oh, did he move his shoulder perfectly so that his, you know, his pauldron like came down?
No,
and I understand that idea, but like, you know, yeah. It's just interesting.
I've always kind of like always had mixed feelings towards the static defenses, because you have the static defenses, which can definitely hasten make gameplay a lot easier because, you know, if I'm attacking the player, I roll some dice and then ask the player, does a 16 hit your AC? Oh, your AC is actually a 22. Okay, then it doesn't hit and we move on. And it's fairly rapid. Whereas my system, because both people are rolling, like if one of my monsters is attacking Dan's character, we both need to roll attack and then he needs to roll defense. It's a little slower, but what I have found when I've been DMing it or storytelling it, as we like to say, is that it keeps everybody engaged because they don't know when they're going to be attacked, and they need to be there to roll dice and make decisions when they're going to be attacked. You can spend resources on increasing your defense and your attack, so it becomes a game. Part of the game becomes managing your stamina and or mana, depending on what your primary and how you're using your resources.
And then you're choosing what defense you roll.
So you have 3 defenses that are default that you can roll. You have parry, and you have block, and you have dodge. And you get to choose one of those. So you could try to parry a ranged weapon as an example. There are some penalties for that, but you could do it.
Sure.
Unless it's a bullet.
You could still do it, you just get lots of penalties.
Ricochet the bullet back at you.
Yeah, it didn't go well last time I tried that.
So that's kind of one of the core mechanics that we've decided early on that we've been happy with. That's probably one of the longest lived and lasting things about the system.
Sure. One other thing that I think is different and interesting about this is that we're only using 2d8s. You know,
Yeah.
maybe we're using 2d4s.
We use
Sometimes.
2d8s and a d4 usually, but
Okay. Well, still.
Yeah, null or edge.
yeah. So
Okay.
yeah. So
Interesting.
Dan brings up another great system that is in the game, that you have edge or null. As a whole, it's just called the edge system. But you have, if you gain edge, your first edge gives you a 1d4 to your combat rolls. It works a little bit different depending on which pillar you're in. So you can see very quickly that the terminology becomes very important. Yeah. And so if you're in combat, though, it adds you 1d4, and then for every edge you gain past that 1d4, it only adds +1. Up to, I think it's +9. I could be wrong about that. I think it's +8 or +9. And then null is its counterpoint. For every null that you have, it counteracts an edge, or if every edge you have, it counteracts a null. And so it's possible to end up back at 0 with no bonus, which in some cases might be the ideal world.
Sure.
It's better than negative.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so and they both operate the same. They're just two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, it's interesting that, well, coming out of D&D, right? Because they'll use whatever dice, right? Like they'll say, oh, well, this is a D percentage this time, because of whatever. And usually they're using the D20 when it's a challenge, which I like. It's certainly interesting coming to this game. I guess it's just not as familiar for me.
Yeah.
Where it's like,
Familiar.
yeah, where it's like, with like the high stakes and the low stakes, I learned that today. So like, it's certainly been a learning process.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, some of that is definitely intended because it's a whole new system.
Right.
Like, I don't want
Of
to copy,
course.
like, even though the D20 system is an open license system, I don't necessarily want to base it off of that.
And actually, yeah, I think that as far as, a new and fresh idea as far as role-playing goes, I think you definitely at least, uncovered something good,
Cool.
especially with the D8, and especially with the points that you can allocate to certain challenges.
Yeah.
Right? You know. And I'd like to go back to the combat thing for a second, you know, because getting those like points that you can allocate to actions and stuff like that, that's also interesting, and being able to buy back resources is also interesting. So, you know, I actually do think I like the cyclicalness of that, you know, where it's like you can use, say, 6 points to do 2 things, and then use those 2 other points to, you know, put back into mana or put back into health or something like that. Health doesn't work like that.
No, health does not work that way. But what Dan's alluding to is the action token system that we have as one of the how we manage our action economy. And so, depending on which tier of creature you are, we're all heroic tier. You get a certain number of action tokens. We get 8 action tokens. And every action costs a certain number of action tokens, and you can spend them however you like for movement or attacking or digging through your backpack or looting a chest or whatnot.
But theoretically, like, a standard action would be like 3 points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
or
so,
an attack.
yeah, exactly. And so, at the end of your turn, if you still have some action tokens left, you can sacrifice those action tokens to re-up your stamina or your mana a little bit, which allows it to have a full like economy for all your resources. One of the things that I personally super like, which hasn't been brought up yet, is I love that we have the 3 resource pools: health, stamina, and mana, and we have tokens for them.
Sure.
We have physical tokens for them rather than just numbers on a page.
Yes, that does make it a little bit
I
fun.
really personally like that a lot. It does in some ways kind of clunk up the table and make some things a little slower, but I really think that what the benefits we derive from it are worth it.
Sure.
It's especially nice as a spellcaster because some of the spells are threshold, which means you need to have it like within your mana pool, but it doesn't actually expend it. Expend actually gets rid of it from your mana pool, and then there's
Deplete, which just gives you wounds, so it's basically permanently gone until you heal.
and then there's
Sustain.
yeah. Where if you actually have your physical things, you're like, okay, I'm sustaining these, move it over to some place so you can physically see instead of having to sit there and juggle numbers in your head like, okay, I'm sustaining 3 of these 12 and then I have 2 more going to this, and it's just so much nicer to have just a physical thing to be moving around so you can see it.
Also, you're not erasing holes in your character sheet for your spell slots and HP and all that other garbage.
One of my favorite things about it though is that I can look over at a player, or if I am a player, I can look at one of my party members and I can just look over and see, hey, Ryan's character is doing really poorly on health. He normally has a lot more red beads piled in that cup right there.
All 6 of them.
yeah. So I better get over there and heal him, or whatnot.
Or if I want to take someone out of the fight.
Or yeah, exactly. Like you can physically see the condition of the character in real time, rather than being like, oh Ryan, well, how much HP do you have, man? Like.
I also like the action tokens being physical because then, like, we have a little bag of them, and when my turn is over, I just pass the bag to the next person. It's a very nice way to be like, okay, this is the end of my turn, you're next, without it having to be like, hey, yo, hello? Hey, Zach, it's your turn, Zach.
Yeah, it's real satisfying just slamming that bag of doubloons. Is that
Yes.
what we're
Yeah,
using right now?
doubloons.
Just clank.
That too.
Yeah, so I mean that's one of my personal favorite things. Just, I mean, though I've contemplated the use of potentially 1 or 2 more types of tokens, I probably wouldn't go much beyond what we have now, just because it is starting to kind of reach that critical mass where we're striking the fine line between like slowing the game down and the fun of having tokens versus I don't know what tokens for what and what's happening and who am I.
Yeah, I the only thing I was going to say about the whole having the counters and stuff like that, having the little beads, is that it seems really I don't know, it seems like marketable. I don't know how to say that. Like, like I could imagine like a starter box that comes with like, 50 of each.
Yeah, and like specially designed for like, yeah, and that's kind of why I was really excited to find little
interesting.
plastic heart tokens that I found at the dollar store a few weeks ago. That was really thrilling for me.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Should bring out one of those containers.
Yeah, go grab one.
Yeah. I will.
But no, I mean, definitely the physical, like actual touching of the beads, certainly I think keeps me involved.
Yeah.
As far as everything goes.
Yeah, and I think I'm inclined to agree with you. Eventually, I would definitely like to have an app as well to help track everybody with that, and then maybe some kind of like chat room that everybody could log into to see everybody's like status and pool.
That'd be interesting.
That way, if for whatever reason you just really don't like having several things of beads around or whatnot, you have this app where everything everybody can log in. Or if you're playing online with a group of friends, everybody has this app they can log in and see what's going on. And it's should be pretty awesome. It's obviously pretty far in the future at this point, but just an idea I've had. Okay, that was probably really loud.
I need to mute that part.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
But yeah, so we have all these wonderful tokens and containers, and you have stamina and mana and health, and these are little hearts, which are fantastic.
Yeah.
Here.
D. Davis. Hold that up to the camera.
Shadow.
Void.
Shadow
Void.
Man.
It's just
Just try to find
That's
the
not a
camera.
Kansas right
Okay,
now.
Up. Yep, you almost got it.
Oh, wow. I'm so pretty. So another thing that I personally really like, of course I'm building the game, so I hope I like it, right? But is each pillar operates differently. How do you guys feel about that so far? So like when you can tell the difference between a combat roll and like when you're trying to spot somebody.
Well, I don't know if I have had any encounter with that. As in, like, I haven't gotten to the part where I try to use something and,
Noel.
you say, oh, well, what I'm trying to get to is that, whenever I use a skill, it just seems like I'm using a skill from, D&D or something like that. It doesn't really seem like there is a big difference. I understand the criteria, but also, it's just basically using the skills.
Well, sometimes when you're shaking on a thug, you're just shaking on a thug. It doesn't matter what system you're using.
Yeah.
That's true. And yeah, so I don't know if I've ever, I don't know if I have hit a roadblock with that yet. So
Okay.
what I'm saying is that it's good. It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
So far, there hasn't been anything you said no, the system can't do that yet.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm a big believer in just like making things move forward. So if I'm not sure of something, or I don't have something for it potentially, or whatnot, I'm just gonna be like, cool, we're gonna handle it this way for now. We'll come back to this once we find the actual ruling that we've written, see if it needs to be changed, or if we just need to remember it in the future, because it's actually quite simple and we just forgot. Go ahead, Kitty.
We do need to, next time that comes up with the social stuff, it seems like most people are unsure of that, so we need to just go through with it anyway, because that has not been tested.
Yes, this is true.
Like when I tried to lie to
Yeah.
the goblin about their friend that they were looking for just being dead. Also, a system I've been kind of fiddling with while we've been playing was the unique way you did alignment, which is you get a certain amount of points and you put them into each alignment. You are not strictly chaotic neutral,
Yeah.
and you are not strictly lawful good or neutral evil or whatever. You just get points in each different alignment. And I put all of my points except for, I put 1 in good, 1 in evil, and 4 in chaos. And so my character steals what she wants. She she messes with people, but there's no malice behind any of it. It's just this kind of ocean give and take.
It's foolishness.
is what it is.
Oh, it certainly got her chloroform.
Yeah. Well, do you have anything to share, Rye Guy? You've been awfully quiet so far.
I'm tired.
That's fair.
But in regards to the game, yeah, I'm just really excited to see more as we get more into combat, so we can really see how the magic system sets up.
Yeah.
Just because we're kind of, for the most part, limited in the spells that we've been doing. However, I'm really excited because I like how open-ended the system is from just a individual spells by spell basis. From the whole, you have your word and then you get to decide how you're augmenting that with additional whatever you want to do. And it'd be really cool to see more applicable uses for that, because as of right now it's really hasn't been more than maybe using the bolt feature to augment a word or just little things here or there. The more we get into combat, it'd be more easy to see what does and doesn't work,
Yeah.
since we've only really been in combat twice.
Yeah. Two
So.
seconds.
We're also still on garbage goblin zombie island.
Yeah.
You be nice to our garbage
We-
zombie island. We love
We
it.
are playing easy mode because every encounter has like a horde of goblins backing us up.
At least so far, yeah.
I'm excited to see what happens with your two characters when you're somewhere you've never been before.
Uh-huh.
Everything will be very exciting, and we'll do lots of crazy things. Which tends to be what our characters do now by taking everything quite literally.
It's actually interesting that the 4 Chaos character is kind of the straight man of the group.
Are you kidding?
I don't know. I'd say
Mr. Alleyway Squatsman.
Bartholomew's
That's,
pretty
that's
straight.
normal.
Yeah.
That's a normal
Forward.
thing to do. Coming out of the
Wait.
water and like pulling someone under the waves, and
I
then
was
you're like,
robbing
wow, what a surprise. I mean, people got scared of that? That's weird.
Well, no, I was expecting people to get scared. I wanted a little bit of panic. That's funny. I wasn't expecting the horde of shark goblins to see that and be like, oh, this is a raid now. We're gonna kill everyone.
Never underestimate the swarm.
I feel
It
like
was
my
also
character
a swarm.
literally looks around and is like, how am I going to survive today? Like, how am I going to live through the day today? Like,
By walking up to the apothecary and being like, hey man, hey bro, what's up?
hey bro, what's happening?
Waiting for Destiny in the back alley.
I didn't know what to do. I was waiting for the goblins to show up.
That's fair. I mean, fortunately, it sounds like everybody's been having a lot of fun, so I think that by itself speaks volumes of the system, because I've played systems where it's like, even D20 systems where we're playing the game, I'm just like, wow, this is just not fun. This just isn't fun. Which, to be fair, can have a lot to do with like who's DMing and how they're DMing and the people you're playing with and all that stuff. But also it has a lot to do with the system you're playing and the fact that, you know, like, we're having fun. I think that also speaks volume of the system thus far. The one pillar that I really want to work on the most is definitely the social pillar. Definitely has gone, we've had hundreds of iterations of it, and it's just, we can't seem to find something that is going to be different enough to work, but also streamlined enough to work quickly.
Right.
So we have a couple test ideas, and Zill's right, we need to, next time a social situation comes up, we need to really just slow down and like try it out. But as Rye Guy was saying with the magic modules, I always try to design the modules as kind of relatively open as possible. So the player, like, even though they're constrained to a specific kind of system, still has a lot of agency in deciding how, what they're going to do and how they're going to execute the system. And the hardest, like the wizard module was relatively easy for me to do that. Like I still think some of the numbers need to be tweaked and maybe some of the action economy as well. But, you know, I'm pretty happy with it overall. The one that is definitely the biggest work in progress is the divinity system, the divine module.
Yes. We've just been kind of working on it every time somebody hits the next tier, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. And I'm also having trouble with that, with the divine module, which is probably okay because it's a divine module to an extent, making it feel kind of, letting the player have some agency about how they use it. Because I'm kind of big on player agency. I think the player should be able to decide most decisions and how they want to play and things about their character, which I often let my players write most of the story. I'll often just have a vague idea of like things that I would like to do, and then let people, spend the day in town or go tromp off into the jungle and get attacked by zombies. Like, that's just kind of how I DM. It works out well most of the time, but it definitely has its flaws. I would really like to see somebody else at some point try their chops at DMing the system, which I don't really expect any of you guys to do quite yet, because again, the system's only like probably 75-ish% complete at tops. So, I don't know. Does anybody have any last questions before we kind of wrap this up? We've already run a really long time, so I kind of like to keep it a little shorter.
I think I'm good.
You good? How about the Void?
Really, like, I just want to... I've played 2 sessions, one with combat, one without combat, and I just want to say, like, the actual combat system is pretty solid. Like, there's systems out there like the End of the World system and the Means of Mastermind system where combat can be a bit of a slog if things aren't moving quickly. And it seems like with the like relatively small numbers and the simple math that goes into it, you can have a pretty robust combat encounter, and you can feel each impact because you are actively participating in it.
Yeah.
And there's always the chance to I need to not get hit by this or I'm going to go down. And you can always gamble that stamina to be like, I need to beat you this roll.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it pays off, and sometimes you get floored anyway.
Yep.
Or sometimes they rolled a 3 and you just pumped yours to 18, and now you have no stamina left for the next guy who's coming at you.
I'll just say one last thing, but to me in the combat, I thought it was really dynamic, where I could choose to maybe attack this turn and then maybe take a defensive stance or move, or we could use our stamina to defend, right? Theoretically.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, certainly interesting to have that versatility just in the individual rounds themselves, saying, oh well, I can keep my points and spend them on someone else's turn, or I can spend them on my stamina. I can use my stamina on their turn. It's pretty great. It's pretty good.
You can hold on to your points till the end, or till your next turn, if you want to smack at someone who's running past you.
Yeah. No, the combat system as a whole, I feel like, is probably the most complete portion of the system, despite the lack of talents that I've written and despite a few other things. I would say that it's definitely the most solid and complete portion of the system, just because it's been the most tested. Because in my experience, people, when we're playing, tend to default to the combat opposed roll for pretty much everything, which is a pretty easy knee-jerk reaction to do when you're used to a system like D20.
And it's also pretty common for social encounters and just exploring the world to just skip all of the checks completely and be like, okay, how are you doing this? And if you give a reasonable answer, then the answer is just cool, you succeed, without ever rolling any dice.
Yeah, and
it depends on the DM.
Yeah, and I do that occasionally, if you have enough ranks, or in my case tiers, in something, you just succeed, because there's no real point. But
so, to compare another role-playing game in M&M, occasionally the DM has the option to just skip particular rolls. For example, if you have enough in your drive skill, you could just drive a car.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's nice to see that be adopted into this as well.
Yeah. So there's tons and tons of different RPG systems out there. I'm just hoping to distinguish my system and or our system, and I'm hoping everybody has fun with it. And it's definitely going to be a pillar of this channel and my future board game coffee shop that I would like to found as well. The Void has something.
I would like to add before we wrap up here, on this channel, probably within the next week or so, there will be a first session of a Mutants Masterminds recording going up. Not not sure of a title just yet, but wait and see. And hopefully you've subscribed when we told you at the beginning.
Yeah, yep.
And you'll see it when your feed's soon enough.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Pretty excited for it. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button and the bell if you want to get some alerts.
And that X button on top right of your computer, just click that one time. You'll be, boom.
Alt F4.
Alt F4, exactly.
Control W.
Thanks so much, guys. Have a wonderful, wonderful, magical day, all right?